Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Surfers. And so today I wanted to have another watch along with an interview that Tim Ventura has just released with Salvatore Pais. And I think this is one of the most important issues currently going on. Salvatore Pais is someone that should be taken very seriously when it comes to plasma and alternative physics or breakthrough energy. And he's warning of time weapons. And I also see here that the title is the Triarchy of Creation. And as we know, with threefold transformation, this is how patterns in nature work. So I'm very interested to see what he says about that. He regularly talks about the Hermetic principles, which is obviously a part of natural law. And I was going through part one of Catherine Austin Fitz and Joseph Farrell's quarterly and yearly report recently. It's about 3 hours 45, packed with good information. And I'll have to comment on that about Salvatore Pais' work as well. I do think that this is to do with Trump has his media companies merged with an energy joint fusion company, one of only 2 or 3 in the world that capable of doing such, as is what I've learned from Ashton Forbes, who's been teaching about the plasma orbs, and he's had Salvatore on several times as well. There was also a Hard Truths episode with Ashton Forbes earlier today released with a lady, I think her name was Dana, and it's to do with plasma consciousness. And so Salvatore is talking about that here. And as we finish the last episode on the digital control grid, I do think that media and breakthrough energy, there's something very special about breakthrough energy in media, and I think that we're going to learn about it with what Salvatore is talking about here, because it's speaking directly to the divine in terms of the natural way of life and this kind of organic kind of pathway with plasma and plasma consciousness, and it speaks to the ether, and it speaks to technology that we've known about for a very long time. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I just want to say as well, thank you to Tim Ventura for doing this interview. I know that a large part of this is a watch along, and I'm doing this for educational purposes only. This is really important stuff. So, and I really want to share the journalism and the investigations of people that and researchers of people that are putting good work together. So thank you to Tim Ventura for doing this.
I do not represent the U.S. government in my capacity as a private citizen on your show. My statements, again, are my own. Now, allow me, sir, before we go into weapons of time, for a brief introduction of what I hope will be the third time you have me on, namely something called the Triarchy of Creation. The whole idea that it is quite possible that Roger Penrose is 100% correct, that we are dealing with a cyclical cosmology. Namely, everything does not come from nothing. Everything comes from everything. And let me explain. I have written it down so I don't stammer and stutter and so forth, which
the infinite nature of reality, because we are infinite, we are immortal as well. So absolutely.
I usually never do, since I never, this is the first time that I actually read something. I usually go totally improvisational, but this morning I had an epiphany of putting these words down. Now, I hope that your followers, how should I say, do not think me of great hubris, but I do believe there's something to follow here. See, in March of 2026, unbeknownst to many, I gave a virtual talk at the March.
You meant to say March of 2024, just saying not 2026. FYI, I watched the first 10 minutes earlier and just thought it was too good to not do a recording on it.
Conference of the American Physical Society, of which I am a member, although I have not paid my dues. this particular cycle. They're quite high. You would not believe the number. So I'll leave it there. But this is, again, I love the American Physical Society, and thank you very much for them to give me the honor to present my work, which only 6 slides were based on the superforce. If you remember, we already had our first interview was based on the superforce, the whole idea that the superforce is c to the 4th divided by big G. So it's on the order of 10 to the 44 newtons. So a rather enormous, ginormous force that has the ability, it acts as the force of unification of all known 4 forces, namely the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force, given that gravity is indeed a force and not necessarily just the geometry of space-time curvature. So let me read briefly. It is the superforce acting at the superdensity condition, and I will explain later exactly what superdensity is. Again, it is the superforce acting at a superdensity condition which generates a super bang, which as a quantum bounce and gives rise to a super intelligence due to the plasma nature of our cosmos. It is the power and the glory of the superintelligence as a source of creation, which gives rise to the fundamental understanding of our origins as a species. In other words, everything does not come from nothing. Everything comes from everything. This is a true gnosis, in my opinion, worthy of our ancient Greek ancestors. Let me explain that the triarchy of creation, imagine the possibilities of the triarchy of creation. Again, superforce
Imagination's key.
acting at the superdensity condition, generating a super bang, and ensuing a superintelligence due to the plasma nature of the universe. This triarchy of creation can also bridge the apparent divide between religion and science. Imagine a new religion for the 3rd millennium, not based on lore or myth or folklore, but based on pure science. Thank you.
I actually disagree with what he was getting to at the end, because true natural law, oral wisdom stories told by, held through traditions for millennia, mythology and folklore, these are all very real science. And also religion comes from the word religare, which means back to hide, to hold back or to bind from forward progression. We don't need any more religion of any sort. Let's not do that.
Thank you for allowing me this. And I will explain, if you have any questions on this, let me briefly say what superdensity is. Superdensity is c to the 5th. So again, the speed of light to the 5th power divided by big G square h bar. H, again, big G being Newton's universal gravitational constant, and h bar being the reduced Planck constant, so h divided by 2 pi. It's on the order of 10 to the 96 kilograms per minute cube. Enormous. Again, superforce being on the order of c to the 4th divided by big G, hence 1 followed by 44 zeros, newtons, 10 to the 44 newtons. It is the superforce acting at the superdensity condition that generates a quantum bounce, thereby generating a super bang, which, because of the plasma nature of our universe, again, the great Anthony Peratt, student of Hans Alfvén of magnetohydrodynamics fame, because of this plasma nature of our universe, quite possibly ensues a super intelligence. The beauty of the super intelligence, it has the ability to reinvent the cosmos as we understand it. Imagine the ability of reemergence, resurgence, resurrection, and the ability to experience new universes in a cyclical manner. Hence, truly, Roger Penrose is right on the dot with this idea of cyclical cosmology. Everything does not come from nothing. Everything comes from everything.
True.
So, Sal, let me jump in there. I did not think that you could top the super force, but you've done it, sir. You have done it.
Oh,
the only way to go
God
from there
bless
is
you, sir.
up. So you
God
are
bless
an
you, sir. Thank you very
absolute
much for
big
that.
picture
And
thinker.
and I have a way to describe this. This is truly unique about this. I call it the triarchy of creation because I believe it can bridge. So imagine a religion of unification, one that is based purely on peace rather than the violence.
What he means is objective morality and natural law and threefold transformation, the unification of the divine masculine and feminine. This is what the blue lily and teaches us about. This is why the symbology is in Egypt as well. And there are other plants that do it, whether you've got the rose for the divine feminine and the hawthorn for the divine masculine, and then the blue lily for the unification of the two. These patterns show up in all these different worlds. But yeah, we definitely are going to keep pushing back. We definitely don't need a religion, but we do need people to align their actions with natural law, which is knowing right from wrong by turning ourselves inside out. This is not preaching of just catching my own language, but this is all about our own internal gaze and doing our own shadow work, so we can know what right and wrong is, so we can act in an objectively moral way. Because the formula is that freedom depends on us individually making those decisions to align our actions with natural law, so that as the aggregate moves into a more moral state, we then become collectively free. And so this is what we learn by observing these patterns in nature, and this is what nature itself tells us, which is not a religion. And this is observable by everyone, and they're these are eternal principles that are self-evident.
Of years that have passed. Imagine something that is based on pure science that can bring in all the people of the world, even the ones that do not believe in a creative deity, because the super intelligence.
Not about a deity. It's it was about understanding that we are immortal beings and co-creators of this reality. I like the word divine personally, but yeah, not about any external deity. This is about sovereignty and internal monarchy, or being our own government on the internal, because there are no external authorities.
We are talking about the source of human consciousness as well as all universal consciousness. I believe this is the way toward understanding a physics of consciousness. And I believe that by attempting the idea of a machine sentient based super intelligence, hence a singularity, it is quite possible we're trying to mimic what already exists in nature.
Mm-hmm. True.
Well, so if I could back up for just a second, in terms,
it's an imitation of humans and nature.
In terms of your description of this, I have read about this model before. If I understand it correctly, basically what you have is a big bang, you have the rapid expansion, then you have contraction, a big crunch, and the crunch itself initiates another big bang over and over and over. It becomes a cyclical, basically, universe cycle, right?
The mechanism is more, I love the way you express it. The way I see it is, again, think of it as, okay, it's analogous to the physics of a core bounce in a type 2A supernova. In a supernova explosion, especially one that is type 2A, we're talking about what truly happens is that eventually the fuel that causes the star to undergo fusion and thereby build its energy output, is counteracted by its gravitational force toward the core. Eventually, the fuel runs out, quite possibly when it achieves iron. At that state, the gravitational force overtakes the production of fuel. The fuel basically ceases. And a implosion toward the core is initiated to the point of almost 1 femtometer, a 10 to the minus 15 meters. Something unusual happens. That is the realm of the strong nuclear force. At that point, it is the strong nuclear force that says, thus far and no further. And this thing rebounds, hence the idea of a core bounce. I am talking about, again, the superforce acts at the Planck scale. So we're talking about not 10 to the minus 15 meters, but 10 to the minus 35 meters, whereby the superforce, again, this whole idea of the quantum bounce occurring. Why? Because of the super density condition. We're talking about 10 to the 96 kilogram per meter cubed. You see, in a type 2A supernova, again, the analogy that I'm using, we're talking about densities on the order of 10 to the minus 14 grams per centimeter cube. So again, quite high, but nothing like the Planck density of 10 to the, again, the super density is the Planck density. C to the 5th divided by big G square H bar on the order of 10 to the 96 kilograms per meter cube. You will indulge me some small errors in the number itself, but it is on the order of 10 to the 96 kilograms per meter cube. Again, so in other words, in our case, in the case of the triarchy of creation, it is the super force acting at the Planck scale, not the strong nuclear force acting at 10 to the minus 15 meters, but the super force acting at the Planck scale because of the super density condition. Instead of generating this core bounce, it generates a quantum bounce because we're talking about Planck scales now. So hence quantum theory comes in. This is the beauty of it. This is the analogy, I believe, is 100% real. I would love to have some cooperation in the future to actually write a paper, possibly introduce it to the Astrophysical Society. I do understand by the way, from some of your interviews, it's extremely hard to publish, especially when one is not, for example, a PhD in astrophysics. But I truly 100% believe that this is the way, that this is exactly what happens because it talks to Penrose's cyclical cosmology, this whole idea that, you see, it's based on this quantum bounce that has also been talked about by Ashtekar, Abhay Ashtekar of loop quantum gravity fame. I call it a quantum bounce. It should be called an Ashtekar bounce. But then again, at Planck scales, this thing occurs. I call it the super bang because this is not the big bang. This is not the same mechanism. This whole idea that it starts from an inflaton, that all of a sudden from nothing, from a quantum fluctuation within the vacuum energy, somehow this develops. Please, our universe has always been here. This is the beauty of it. Everything does not come from nothing. Everything comes from everything. What happens is that because of the plasma nature of the universe, and this is where a great man, Hans Alfvén, he believed the nature of plasma undergoing a far from equilibrium dynamics quite possibly develops consciousness. If this is true, if we can prove this experimentally, it is quite possible the super intelligence, it is the absolute everything and all. It even talks to great philosophy such as Hermeticism, the idea that all is one. We can speak more on this eventually, but I would love to get together to say someone in the astrophysics, maybe someone that you can recommend, someone that would be able to entertain these ideas, and together we can publish something of that nature, because I do believe this is the way to go. And at that March 2024, okay, March 2024 presentation I had of the American Physical Society, when I presented the name of the presentation based on the Superforce was Superforce, a Path to Quantum Gravity ? Just 6 slides. The session chair he was a little stumped at first, and then he said, do you mean to tell me that the energy gradient at the Planck scale equals the superforce and equals the energy gradient at the observable cosmic scale? Which is equation number 1 in that paper. Superforce, the force of unification, is one of the papers that I present, along with another one that I wrote with Dr. John Brandenburg. He did most of the work because his was the GEM theory related to the superforce idea, which I introduced. By the way, I love John Brandenburg. I wish we could write another one together. Maybe this one, if he'd be so inclined. But anyway, in my opinion, this is something that should be considered, because this is far more than just the possibility of understanding human origins, or rather based on a cyclical cosmology. It also makes tremendous sense. There is something in it that has, see, I've always believed that simple is good. This is simple. This is not complex.
Yeah. Sal, let me jump in for a sec. So
absolutely.
Again, these are incredibly big, the biggest of big ideas. These are, you're echoing thoughts by other people. And I want to use that to support this idea. What you're saying, this did not just come out of your own work. This is something that other thinkers have been framing in different ways for a long time. So let me just run through these really quick. One of them, you touched on intelligence.
This makes it perfect sense for me, and I'm glad there are people like Tim Ventura that are about to break it down with relevant people.
Coming out of galactic plasma, or you know, plasma throughout the universe, right?
Right.
Again, that is a tremendous idea in terms of scope. It's impossible for my mind to truly grasp. There's a book called A New Science of Heaven: How the New Science of Plasma Physics is Shedding Light on Spiritual Experience, by Robert Temple. I have had that one recommended to me by a number of physicists. And Robert Temple discusses many of the same ideas there, that galactic plasmas, these clouds of charged particles, could form intelligence. And who knows, maybe that would take eons.
The idea was pioneered by Hans Alfvén of Nobel Prize fame, the father of magnetohydrodynamics. In my opinion, he was the first to initiate that plasma in a dynamic state far from equilibrium quite possibly engenders consciousness.
Okay. Yeah. So it goes, so Temple may have actually drawn from him, it sounds like.
Quite possible.
The other one, let me see, and this was kind of an idea. So you had talked about, again, intelligence throughout the universe in between these big bangs. There's also this idea, you're getting into, let me see, there's what they call a big bounce scenario. And this was the idea of the big crunch, where the universe collapses in on itself. May not be the final end, as you just said, but rather a phase in a cyclic universe, what they call a big bounce. And one of the ideas, and I've read about this in the past, is something I believe called Dyson's eternal intelligence. And so Freeman Dyson suggested that even as the universe changes,
amazing man,
intelligence would adapt. And originally, I think he was thinking about something called the Big Chill, right? Where before this collapse, the universe slows down in theory, and it basically gets colder and colder, and there's less energy. How could intelligence utilize infinite actions in finite time to maintain consciousness? So that is one idea, but then there's also kind of a corollary to it called surviving the rebirth. And basically, the idea was, if a future civilization can encode its information into a form that survives this high energy singularity, the big crunch, maybe they could survive the next big bang. So again, big ideas, and these are incredible philosophical themes that I think the most brilliant minds, including yours, have wrestled with.
It's important, though, in my opinion, this triarchy of creation brings together something very interesting. It's based on the superforce. You see, without the existence of the superforce at the Planck scale, none of this would happen. It is basically the superforce inventing the superintelligence because of the plasma nature of the universe. But the superbang itself occurs due to this quantum bounce that quite possibly is analogous to a core bounce in a type 2A supernova. So again, it's association of ideas, quite possibly some of them erroneous. However, I believe there is some semblance of great physics in this, and we should follow this path.
Absolutely.
Follow this path, because I believe this idea of triarchy of creation can bridge the gap between science and religion. Imagine a new religion, a religion of unification, one of peaceful coexistence, not based on lore, folklore, myth, or things that have brought constant warfare, but one that is based on pure science, physics driving religion. Okay, enough of that. Let me start on weapons of time. Let me introduce this idea.
Yeah, go for it. Take it away. Take it away.
Okay. In the winds of time, we are all but shadows and dust. Yet she who controls time controls everything. Let me explain. Time is not an illusion. Time is a very physical reality.
Yeah, and I had to point that out to David Icke actually on X of all things, which I'm not really very active on. But yeah, it's an emergent property. It's not an illusion, as he would say. He's getting a bit misguided there because of the whole, past, present, future all happening simultaneously. And so he's arrived at an incorrect destination by saying that time is an illusion.
Think of space as a macroscopic quantum structure from which the very fabric of our cosmic reality arises. Now, think of time as a peculiar informational energy which permeates the structure. The synthesis, the fusion of space and time gives rise at macroscopic scale to what we understand as a space-time continuum, the idea that Minkowski married the two into one entity. Now think of breaking the Schwingle limit, hence putting a rip, a tear into the space-time continuum locally at this point in time. This destroys the arrow of time, hence rendering the Stephen Hawking chronology protection conjecture at that point null and void. Hence, time travel to the past becomes permissible.
So Ashton Forbes pushes back on this part in particular about the going back in time part, because he did bring this up on a previous interview that we've gone through, just to flag that. He sees this as like turning the dial, but the retro causality, and yeah, that is not, they're not 100% aligned on that.
This is the idea. Now, the whole thing truly arises from Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Delta E, delta T is on the order of h bar. Again, from quantum theory, you can relate delta E with h bar omega, where omega as actually the frequency of vibration of what we understand as ZP, 0-point energy. Truly the quantum nature of our quantum reality, the fabric at the quantum scale. From that, you easily get time is on the order of 1 divided by frequency. It could be actually of spin and or vibration, because dimensionally that remains correct, irrespective on exactly where it comes from. Because see, the beauty is the mathematics of spin and the mathematics of vibration are very much similar. It's just that in one case, we talk about amplitude of vibration, in the other one, radius of spin, and another, again, the whole idea of radial speed, but it is much easier to vibrate than to, as you well know, to actually spin something, say, more than 10 centimeters in diameter. Because of centrifugal loading, this thing comes apart as at anything even higher than 10,000 radians per second. So we talk about 100,000 RPM. Now, based on this, T is on the order 1 divided by frequency, could be of spin and or vibration. Something wonderful arises just by taking the chain rule of differential calculus. The mathematics speaks to a minus delta T being on the order of tau sub S, which is a dimensionless constant, times delta omega divided by omega squared. Everything is, again, dimensionally consistent. That is the first check. But this minus delta T speaks to a reverse temporal excursion. Again, the possibility of time travel to the past. Now, why is this possible again? Because by breaking the Schwinger limit locally, we have put a rip locally at a quantum level at that particular locality of the space-time continuum itself. Hence, what we understand as the arrow of time is destroyed there and then. Hence, it is possible, or rather time travel to the past is permissible. Now, the beauty of this is that we are talking now, if you consider this, the engineering of this idea truly gives rise to temporal weapons, weapons of time, which when designed, developed, and fielded, would prove highly disruptive to the arsenals of nations. Imagine the ability to win all wars, even before those wars are fought.
So, Sal, let me jump in here real quick. I did research as well. I was going through everything that you sent me before the interview, and I got completely turned around. And so I had to do a bunch of research, and I thought, you know what? If I'm lost, the audience will be lost. So I tried to come up with some quick translations here. The Schwinger limit that you're talking about is basically the spark gap of the vacuum. And in everyday life, a strong enough electric field can rip electrons off atoms to create a spark. Now, the Schwinger limit is the vacuum version of that. If the field gets intense enough, and that has to be incredibly intense, empty space becomes unstable and can convert field energy into real matter as electron-positron pairs. So you get these high-energy gamma rays, high-energy, like interactions like that, and it literally creates matter. It creates these pairs of electrons and positrons out of the vacuum. So the vacuum itself stops being a passive stage for other things to act on and starts behaving like an active medium. So
the ether is alive.
That's the Schwinger limit part of it. And then the part that you were talking about, what you're speculating about is in Einstein's picture, energy and pressure don't just sit there, they gravitate. So if you could concentrate and shape extreme energy densities in a very controlled region, you're not only doing quantum vacuum effects, you may also be affecting space-time geometry, right? So this
absolutely
might
to the
be
point of breaking, ripping the space-time fabric itself at the quantum level, which would mean creating a void within the quantum vacuum. This is what Froning was talking about when he talked about, as you know, David Froning, good friend of Paul Murad, a good friend of, God, what was his name? Him and I had a conversation when I was working for the USPTO. Ferris Williams, very interesting man. Wow.
I'm
Now
actually
he
working
also
on a
works for the
story about
Navy, if
Ferris
I'm
right now. Yeah.
Yeah, a very interesting man indeed. One of our best. I believe he had a great deal of nuclear weapon secrets that he took to his grave, among other things. But yeah, Ferris was
I have an anecdote about
his
Ferris.
dynamic theory is quite interesting, to say the least. He actually pointed me to Paul Murad when I sent him my so-called first paper that took me 4.5 years to publish, called "Conditional Possibility of Spacecraft Propulsion at Superluminal Speeds." My goodness, what I went through. It is again exactly what you've noticed, Tim. Extremely hard to publish, especially if you're not one of them. You know,
Yes.
as George Collins said, it's a big club, and you are not part of it. No. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other quote that I keep repeating over and over is science moves forward one funeral at a time, and I think a lot of the skeptics are finally leaving us, right?
But
And
it doesn't have to be like that, Tim. There
yeah,
can be, again, this whole idea of division. Where has division brought us? To this state. Even, well, again, Hatch Act and so forth. I cannot say certain things, but you know what I'm talking about. This is
yeah.
no way. No, again, unification. We need things brought together, not further drawn apart. Yeah.
Well, and that's why I love doing these podcasts. That's why I love being able to speak with people like yourself, getting the message out and being able to frame these ideas in terms that bring people together, right? And then one of the challenges, this is something I'm seeing more and more in my work, is communication. You have different groups of people, right? They come from physics, they come from engineering, they come from, sometimes social sciences backgrounds, and they're
Yes.
hitting these areas of convergence and overlap, but they don't speak the same language, and they end up getting in fights about stuff that they agree on. They just don't realize they agree.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Again, we all have something to contribute. Listen to us. Do not discard us. Do not call us crackpots, cranks, charlatans. We're none of that. We're not pseudoscientists. What we're trying to do is bring a new perspective on old physics. Allow us to do that. Call us brothers. Do not call us crackpots.
So to dig into weapons of time, you put enough energy into a tiny little area and you can tear a hole in space-time.
On the order of 10 to the 25 joules per meter cubed. So we are talking about extreme high energy density. Some people say on the order of neutron stars. Again, I remember when a certain patent examiner by the name of Philip Bonzel reviewed the craft using an inertial mass reduction device, where I spoke of possible electromagnetic energy fluxes. You can think of that as a power density on the order of what? Because it's epsilon 0 times, so it's C epsilon 0 times the electric field strength squared. So we're talking about something on the order of 10 to the 33 watts per meter squared. 10 to the 33 watts per meter squared. This is not easy to understand. However, if you carefully read, again, I give my brother Ashton Forbes tremendous thanks for bringing to the light of day, as they say, this paper called Plasma Compression Fusion Device, in which I speak of a resonance condition that under certain engineering characterization of the problem, of the so-called fusion problem, even in neutronic fusion. So we talk about something that does not produce the, let's say, the neutron rate that would be harmful to human beings. So it is quite possible the plasma compression fusion device could actually be engineered into what I call a plasma disruption fusion weapon. Imagine a pure fusion weapon with one that does not use a fission trigger. Imagine the power of that. But anyway, it's interesting how the only people that have studied my work, It has a great deal of views. It's an IEEE Transactional Plasma Science paper. So highly prestigious journal. However, most of the citations come from highly praised Chinese research teams. It's interesting how the Chinese can pick up on these ideas, yet our own people call us cranks and charlatans just because we do not have the correct pedigree. I have an engineering doctorate in mechanical and aerospace engineering from Case Western Reserve University. It might not be the MIT that people think of at the highest levels of physics and engineering, but that does not mean that I do not have the intellectual potential and capability to undergo these, to come up with these ideas.
Well, and Sal, the public realizes that. I mean, again, you are a celebrity, and that didn't come from nowhere.
You're being too kind, sir. The truth of the matter is, there are a lot of people who think of me as a crackpot. If you read any of these Redditors and what they have to say about me, it's interesting because they're all ad hominem attacks. They never ever challenge my equations. They never challenge my science. And if they do, they're absolutely wrong. Because the Pais effect, the superforce idea, the triarchy of creation, and possibly if we can talk about the triarchy of sentience, namely the possible metamorphosis of an AI agent to an AGI agent, again, all these ideas in time will be proven correct. It is an absolute pity that a person must go through such denigration, such ad hominem attacks by his peers, instead of, again, congregating, coming together, unifying into a greater force of understanding of our physics. It is at this point in time that we need each other most. This division must stop. A unification factor must be brought into the picture, for otherwise it is over for human civilization. That's a prophecy.
Yeah, well, you're raising a good point. Yeah, we need to work together and collaborate, and I think resurrect a lot of the dreams of the 20th century, right? I mean, you look back 100 years, and they had these amazing dreams about space travel and energy and changing the world, and it does seem like, things have become more challenging. Although that being said, when you look at it from another perspective, I mean, look at what's going on with AI today, and look how that's empowering people like yourself and I.
Speaking of which, again, going back to weapons.
So empowering with the digital control grid. But yeah, I understand the point.
Of time. It is our Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, that has recently stated, victory belongs to those who embrace real innovation. Nothing is more innovative than the idea of designing, developing, and fielding weapons of time. I'll leave it there.
That opens up the door to so many big idea plots also. Like, I mean, Sliders, the TV show, although that was Dimensions, and I shouldn't even broach this question. So could weapons of time be used to go to different dimensions, do you think?
Absolutely, sir. And not only that, imagine we recently had, let's call it physical extraction. Now, imagine, let's say, an individual, sometimes unfortunate, it is the unfortunate things of our times that it's individuals that lead to certain wars. Imagine the ability to actually go back in time and try to change the mind of a certain individual. Or not. Well, imagine that.
Yeah, so the obvious one that comes to mind, the old movie trope, is go back in time and kill Hitler, right, before he comes to power. And then the question, and I've actually read philosophical treatises about this. They've said, well, was it Hitler, or was Hitler a product of his time? Would somebody have just come in and replaced him? And
I recommend people watch Mark Passio's exceptional presentation on this, the dark occult origins of Nazism. I've seen it a couple of times. It's phenomenal. It goes into the occult or dark occult origins of Nazism.
They would have had a different name, but same thing.
It is a very good question, sir. But how should I say? Nobody says you got to stop at one individual. And usually there's a cabal of them, right? And usually you know their names well. C'est la vie, as the French say.
Okay, well, so there you go. Yeah. So it does open big possibilities. Now, what about the possibility of going forward in time?
Of course, but this mathematics speaks directly to a possibility of time travel to the past, which again was denied by Stephen Hawking's chronology protection conjecture. I wanted to make sure that, again, I bring forth the idea that there's no such thing as physical impossibilities. That there are no such thing as physical impossibilities, only conditional possibilities. In other words, under certain conditions, everything and anything is possible. So again, the solution to the most complex of problems may actually be extremely simple, depending on perspective. That's key.
Now, do you think that this could be tested using, you were talking about fusion reactors a moment ago.
Yes, yes.
This is something we could test like on a micro scale with power levels that are accessible to humanity right now?
I believe, for example, that first of all, I'm pretty sure that the plasma compression fusion device, someone has tried it, either theoretically or actually put it in practice. I cannot say more than that. I've heard rumors of craters and so forth with Canada, believe it or not. Anyway, I'll leave it there. That's for another time and place, most likely skiffs. But the whole idea is this. Look carefully at the Pais effect, especially the engineering thereof, rather than dismiss it out of hand as the illusory figment of imagination of an engineer that should stick to what he knows, or rather what his pedigree has brought him to be. Think further. We all have great abilities of intellect. Again, the idea of being enslaved by our minds and by our peers is no way to attack and win in physics. Yeah. Because if we unify our thoughts, if we bring, again, it's unification all the way. If we came together, can you imagine the kind of Manhattan Project ideas that we could actually solve if instead of killing each other off, we would actually come together and put our ideas together? Because I truly believe, sir, in this great cosmos of ours, not only are we not alone, but we have enemies out there. Now, must one of these enemies actually present itself for us to come together as a world, as an earth, as a united front?
Let me,
it might be too late.
I'm going to hit more movie tropes here. Even if, in theory, even if we couldn't send people back in time, we could probably find a way to send information. And the movie that comes to mind there is Paycheck. I think that was 2003 with Ben Affleck. And the idea is you build a machine and you can transmit from the beginning of the machines when it becomes operational to any point future, right? So you get the machine built in 2003 and you could send messages back to it from 2025, right? So worst case example, we might be able to do something like that, right?
Among other things, I think weapons of time would be highly disruptive to the arsenals of nations. First of all, they would be greatly reliant on AGI. I think an AGI, and I think we're, again, the ideas that we have now speak to computational power being critical in the, I call it the triarchy of sentience, the idea that computational power, and then the idea of vectored databases, and then the idea that the AI agent would be able to generate an original concept never before seen that is shown to be not an hallucination, thereby bringing about the metamorphosis of an AI agent into artificial general intelligence, machine sentience. Now, what I'm saying is, along with computational power, this whole idea of fusion comes in incredibly, because for the data centers, it would present a boon in energy generation. It would solve that problem. But it's, I think, too much. And again, we are reaching a scaling platform as far as computational power. We should pay more attention. Look carefully what DeepSeek did. We should pay far more attention to algorithmic power in conjunction with computational power. Number one. Number two, there is a great man out there that his theories, for some reason, again, they're kept under covers. I do not understand why. His name is Judea Pearl, Dr. Judea Pearl. This whole idea of causal inference should be brought into the play here. Very important as far as the algorithmic power, the whole idea of the relationship between cause and effect being very important within the scheme of things. Again, this is generative pre-trained transformers. Quite possible there are other ways. There are many ways, there are many roads that lead to Rome, but there's only one Via Appia. Consider that.
Yeah.
Look carefully at these ideas. Do not discard them just because, say, you do not like the man.
And we're jumping kind of out of weapons of time into AI a little bit, but
it's important because they speak to each other. You would need an AGI to do certain things with weapons of time. Again, there's certain things that we would talk in a skiff. Again, we are not here to educate and enlighten the enemy, just to present possibilities of be careful.
Yeah. No, and yes. I'm right there with you. My thought on AI, something I've found, something I'm sure you've seen firsthand is, number one, the human mind can only handle 5 to 7 discrete items at once, right? And we can cheat that, like with a telephone number, we combine that into one string and memorize it, right? And that way we can get around the short-term memory limitations. Whereas with AI systems, they can memorize thousands or millions. They can hold those in memory at once. So that's part of it. But then the other part is the sum total of human knowledge, especially the relationships between diverse scientific papers, it's just too big for the human mind now. But so we can mine that with AI.
And this is where causal inference, this idea of Dr. Judea Pearl, in my opinion, would come in incredible as far as acting as a multiplication, an amplification factor to computational power. Again, the coupling of algorithmic power based on, of course, deep learning and computational power based, say, on incredibly high energy generation. These two should be coupled. Computational power alone, I believe, will reach a scaling platform, a limit. It is algorithmic power that I think will take us to that next step, that along with the idea of using vector databases. So again, things from physical review letters rather than Reddit. And again, this third item, which is extremely important, this AI agent must have the ability to generate an original concept, never before seen, proved not to be an hallucination. Only then, say by experimental verification, because after all, experiment trumps theory every time. Only then could you say that the metamorphosis of an AI to an AGI has been achieved.
Yeah. And one thing I can think of in terms of AGI is being able to steer these weapons of time, right? Being
Yes,
able
sir.
to predict this is what we can
Absolutely.
change
Plasma orbs.
in the past that will lead to the desired butterfly effect.
Remember what I gave the definition of time as: a peculiar type of informational energy which permeates the space structure. It's extremely important to understand those words because it talks to Shannon entropy. It talks to the idea of, again, we're talking about the greatness of von Neumann. Von Neumann, who, after all, if it wasn't for von Neumann, I'm not sure where Edward Teller would have been later on in life, but I'm pretty sure Edward Teller did pretty well for himself. So, yeah.
Now, do you have papers that you could send me? I will put those in the YouTube show notes.
I wish, sir. I have not written anything for a long time, never since the plasma compression fusion device. So all these are ideas still generating in my head still. I would have to actually sit down. Again, what I do for the Navy, and I will be extremely honest with you, has absolutely nothing to do with these ideas. And truly, that troubles me because they do not understand my capability for generating these, what Secretary of War Hegseth calls real innovation.
Yeah.
Give me a lab and a team and let me prove that true magic is possible, that science fiction can become science fact. Instead of listening to, how should I say, people who tell other people, now he has no idea what he's talking about, and thereby, by dismissing me, cause people such as a certain individual pretty high up at the Senate Armed Service Committee to dismiss the ability to say, give me a lab and a team and let me carry on certain work. Of course, at that point in time, I won't be able to do podcasts anymore. But yeah. And as far, again, I'm willing, anyone that has the ability to get these ideas published, I'm willing to co-author papers with them. So you can put it out there. Because again, it is extremely hard to get these kind of ideas for peer review at this point in time, especially not having the quote unquote correct pedigree. It's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah.
Do you know how much it took me, how much effort it took me just to present at the March 2024 conference of the American Physical Society that particular presentation? Superforce, a path to quantum gravity? Question mark. Took quite a bit of doing, and it's way too much effort, especially for something that has absolutely nothing to do with my day-to-day trying to win a, how should I say, trying to keep alive.
Yeah. No, Sal, I absolutely know what you're saying. So I think on that note, we have, I mean, again, this is the biggest of big ideas. We have blown so many minds today. Why don't we leave it there for now? This is actually probably my last podcast in this studio. I am moving, so I'll probably take a month, 2 months off. Yeah.
I hope you have me back for the new studio.
Yeah, hopefully.
And after all,
nice.
I always believe in the number 3. That'll be the 3rd time. Please,
there you go. There you go. So,
thank you, sir.
Yeah, I definitely will continue, but thank you so much for your time
thank
today.
you, Tim. You truly are a brother. I mean it. Namaste, sir. You're a good man, a man of true brotherhood.
Well, thank you, Sal.
I hope everything. I hope for the best. And please don't forget to also speak with your followers and your subscribers, possibly guide them toward Evan Howell's. He had an interview with me on Weapons of Time. Glory be to Enki. Again, I believe it's called the Ancient Pathways.
What's that?
His pod. And also Ashton Forbes, my friend Ashton Forbes, which in my opinion, this man will one day not only prove correct, but I think he's actually bringing disclosure to the masses, and his ability to read physics papers and interpret them at layman understanding of every. It's quite
He's helped me
amazing.
a lot with that.
He truly is amazing. And my friend Dave Rossi of Gen Set podcast. Thank you very much for allowing me to say all this. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I also recommend those people as well. Dave Rossi and Generation Z podcast. Well, there you have it, guys. Episode 42. The answer to everything. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, and it happens to be about plasma and plasma consciousness and the super force and 0 point energy. So, yeah, I'm a big believer in what Salvatore Pais is doing, and believe that 2026 is going to be a year that has a lot to do with energy and all of that. People like Archaics, his data is showing things like, blackouts or different power related things for this year. It's not about predictions for me, but this is what's showing up in the field right now as being key. And so I wanted to get this information to you. And as we learn and inform ourselves as best as we can along the way. So I think he's really tapped in, with the Hermetic principles, with what he's talking about, the triarchy of creation. And I resonate deeply with this and his work. So until next time, guys, this has been Cosmic Surfers. So onwards and upwards. Let's go.